So today I really do want to talk about what's happening with training in the future. And to start off with, I've got a couple of bits of research. One from Deloitte, talking about organizations and saying that most organizations, leaders who are in the L&D or HR leaders, are now quite skeptical or quite doubtful that their teams are skilled enough to face the challenges of the modern world, our fast-changing world, and so training and development is more important than ever before. And one other resource, one other piece of research talking about online learning, which we're going to cover later on in the webinar, said that most people who are learning online do engage without prompting. Now, today's webinar is not only about online learning, so don't feel that I'm trying to push the barrow of online learning as being the future of training. It's not, but it's one of the things that can be very effective and at the moment is not being used anywhere near to its full potential. So we'll talk about a number of things when we talk about the future of training, and one of them is going to be about online learning, but there's a lot more than that as well. A couple of years ago, Penguin Books decided, or they announced, that when they hire new staff, they are not going to care anymore whether those staff have university degrees. With their graduate employment, they weren't looking for university graduates, they were just looking for the best people with the best skills for the job. And that was quite revolutionary. And as it turned out, it wasn't only Penguin that did that. A number of other well-known firms and companies did the same thing. Deloitte, PwC, and EY also announced that they weren't going to look at university qualifications anymore when they were looking at hiring new talent. In fact, some of them, I think EY said that they felt it was a negative, not just that it wasn't a positive. So the traditional way of learning and training has changed, and we're not talking, and I know this webinar is not for a higher education audience, so I'm not talking about the value of a university degree, but I'm just talking about the fact that training always has to be solving a problem. And the old way of training perhaps it doesn't give people the skills to solve the problems that we need for the new world of work. Let me give you a quotation from Google's head of global education. And he says that when he goes around to schools, he never asks kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? He always asks them, what problem do you want to solve when you grow up? Because he realizes that education is all about equipping people to solve problems. And that's the way that people are now looking at workplace education as well. Of course, there are still places where it is just a ticking the box exercise because it has to be done for compliance or for accreditation reasons. But more and more, it's about actually skilling people to be able to solve the problems that they need to solve in our fast-changing world. So broadly, let's look at the future of training, and I'm going to look at this in three areas. So you may have heard about the idea of a flip the classroom. So that's the first area. The second one is flip the teacher. And the third one is flip the program. So flip the classroom is asking the question, is it really true that the best way of training people is to put them in a classroom and teach them content in the classroom environment? The second question, flip the teacher, is it still the case that the best person to teach is the one with the most experience and the greyest hair to teach people the skills that they need? And the third one, which is flip the program, is asking the question, is it really true that the best way for people to learn is for them to be in a structured training program where they do a certain number of modules and in a set structure? Okay, so we're flipping all those three ideas. So as we go through this webinar today, we're going to look at flipping all of those ideas. And in all this, I want to say that this is not necessarily a revolution. You don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So the whole idea of flipping is giving us alternatives. So I hope that at the end of today's webinar, you'll have more tools in your toolkit rather than that you've decided that you've got to completely transform your organization or the way that you deliver training to the people to the learners. Okay, so before we get into those three areas, so this is an overview of the three things we're going to cover today. I want to do a little bit of a poll to find out who's in the room. So in your role, I wonder what is your main training role, because just looking at the sort of people who, the registration list for this webinar, there is quite a diverse group of people. So I'm going to launch a poll here, and there are five options. And the first four, just broadly, I want to know which role you've got. And there may be a bit of overlap, but I'd like you to pick which is your main role. So are you an internal educator within an organization? Are you external? So are you brought in, that's like I am, to present and train within organizations? Are you managing are you responsible for managing the training and the education of your people, so HR, L&D? Are you a senior leader or business owner, or are you an other? And just, I'm curious to know, if you do type other, what the other is, if you type it in the question box. So, okay, let's see. Thank you for voting. We've got about 80% of the people have voted, and that's usually my rule. When we get to 80-20, I'm happy to stop the poll. So I'll leave it for another 3 seconds. And okay, almost everyone has now. Yeah, so David asked the question, when you're using the word training, are you including facilitation, mentoring, coaching, masterclassing? Yes, so all of those things, David. So it's the training as in, yes, absolutely includes facilitating, includes running masterclasses, includes, mentoring and coaching as well. Absolutely. So let's include those. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Yeah, online development coordinator, Juliet says, and Felicity says, help facilitate training activities for colleagues. Okay, great. So let me share the results of the poll, and we'll see, close the poll and look at the results. Okay, so an interesting mix here. So a lot of people who are external educators, so trainers, facilitators, and so on, and some people who are business owners or senior leaders who are responsible for everything in their organization, including training. Okay, so not many people who are HR or L&D, and a few who are internal trainers as well. Okay, and those others are the ones that I read out. Okay, great. So thank you for participating there. Let's look at this first area. This first area is the one that's probably the best known of the change to the way that training is done in workplaces, but also this idea started in traditional school education. And so the idea is that we flip the classroom. So what happens in the traditional classroom, we don't do anymore. So what is a traditional classroom? Well, think about a classroom at the turn of like the end of the 19th century, the start of the 20th century. A classroom looked like this. A whole bunch of kids sitting at desks facing the front with the teacher at the front. Okay, so what's changed? If you think about a classroom now, the modern classroom, well, yeah, we've got color photography. So apart from that, there's a lot of things that are common. Now, I know that I'm diminishing the value of the common classroom, of the typical classroom here, because we have got a lot more sophisticated facilities in classrooms now, but it's interesting just to see the similarities between classrooms more than 100 years ago and classrooms now. And of course, we have got very sophisticated learning environments where students are working with laptops, and they've got a lot of technology at the front of the room, and there's very sophisticated technology that's available now to students in many modern classrooms, and this is workplace classrooms as well as school and university classrooms, but we still have a lot of things that are the same, and the commonality is that there's still one person standing in front of the room delivering content, and the students are sitting there passively taking in that content. Okay, so what's wrong with that? Well, there are a number of other options, which we're going to look at some of them, but one of the biggest questions that many organizations are facing is the question is, are we just wasting our money? Because research into the value of education or the effectiveness of education suggests this. So whenever I show a graph, let me explain what it means. So the effectiveness of education, according to some research from Columbia University, suggests that the amount of time that people spend in the classroom environment, in the training environment, only contributes about a quarter to the value of the effectiveness of the training that they get. About as much comes from the amount of pre-work that they put in before they walk into the classroom or the training room, and 50% of the effectiveness of a training course comes from the amount of work and support that they get and resources that they get after they walk out of the classroom. So you'd think if that's the case, then organizations should be spending, at least investing more of their resources into the post-work than the in-classroom work, and as much into the pre-work as well. However, that's not true. If you look at most organizations across the board, 85% of resources and spend happen in spending money to send people into the training course. So what happens whether you're paying the trainer, whether you pay for resources, the amount of the spend is completely disproportional to the value you're going to get. And in fact, the most effective bit, which is the amount of resources that you invest in people after the training course, is actually the smallest component of the spend. So we seem to have a really big imbalance at the moment. So what do we do? And the whole flip the classroom idea is that instead of having the content in the classroom and the follow-up afterwards, what you do is you get people to consume the content beforehand. So in the pre-work, you get them to think about the content first and prepare for the session. Then in the classroom, instead of wasting their time learning new content, you get them to facilitate. You get the presenter to facilitate. You get collaboration happening. You have discussion. You have case studies. You have the opportunity for people in the room to embed the learning which they got from before the session. And then afterwards, you have a whole bunch of other resources and support to help them embed the learning further in their workplace and on the job. So that's the whole idea of flipping the classroom. And the idea is broadly that what you're doing is you're extending the training experience. So rather than having everybody in a classroom environment where you just have a one-off event, what you do is you extend the experience so that you get 3 bites of the cherry. So you have you have a date where they're going to be in a classroom environment or a training or a workshop or a seminar, but before that you get them to do some pre-work, and after that you get them to do some post-work. And the real flip is that the content happens outside the classroom environment. So the training session is not to teach them content. The training session is to help facilitate that content and help them to get more value from the content that they got in the pre-work. And then afterwards, you have some post-work to help them embed it in their day-to-day work, in their ongoing job and in their typical environment. Okay, so that's the whole flip the classroom idea. It's a big topic, and we're not going to go into this much further today, but I just want to expose you to the idea. If you've never come across the idea of flip the classroom, you might hear the phrase, and that's what it means. And then, now that you understand what it means, then there's a whole other world that opens up in terms of how you can make use of it. Okay, so I want to stop briefly and just check if there are any questions around that idea of flipping the classroom. I know some of the people on the webinar today have been doing flip the classroom for a while, and it works really well for them. Actually, I think yeah, actually, David is one of the people who I had in mind, and David's made a comment here that says, David Pengley, okay, so what you're talking about in flipping the classroom is what I've been doing for years. And it is exactly that, David. So you've had a mix of online courses, webinars, getting people ready for you turning up by doing a pre-event webinar, doing an online course to follow up to reinforce the learning. Absolutely that. Yeah, and Juliet says we've seen it work very well as well. Is that St. John of God Healthcare? I think that SJH. I think that's right. Yep. Okay. So St. John of God, they're doing that. Yeah, great. Sandy says, I get the idea and like it. I've had a few clients take this idea up. Any thoughts about how to get more corporate buy-in with this? I think when I've worked with people, Sandy, they're quite, that graph that I showed you earlier from Brent Peterson's research from Columbia, that's quite useful for them to see that they're maybe not getting the full value from the training course that you run. The challenge in many corporate environments is getting them to set aside the time for the pre-work and the post-work, because it's easier for them to justify. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but it's easier for them to justify, well, we're going to take 3 days out for training and development, and they down tools and they do that at the time, but they don't necessarily get the full value from it. So if you can convince them that it's worthwhile doing the pre-work and the post-work, then it becomes easier to justify. And Sandy says, yep, thanks, I thought your stats from Columbia Uni were helpful. Good. And so the whole idea around this, and Sandy's question leads into this perfectly, is that what we're doing is we're doing blended training. So the old way of doing training, if you contrast the old versus the new, the old way is that you have longer training courses where you have people in person, so they go into a classroom and everyone downs tools for the day. And generally the cost of the training is not how much you pay the trainer or the facilitator, it's actually the cost of lost productivity for the people who are in a workshop and not doing anything else. And the content is pushed on them in that training environment. So what we're talking about with blended learning or flipping the classroom is you may have shorter in-person sessions and it becomes blended. So there's the pre, the post, and the in, all becomes one part of a longer learning experience. And people stay productive because they do some of their training on the job. They might even do online courses in their own time because they're engaged more in it, and it's much more pull. So the students pull the content themselves, and then it's much more facilitated when they get into the classroom. Okay, and Yvonne goes on to say, we're doing this with our in-house leadership program over the next 6 to 12 months. Yeah, great, fantastic. Okay, so that's the first of the three ideas, which is flip the classroom. The second one is the idea of flip the teacher. So do we really believe that the old way of teaching, where the most experienced person is the one who should be leading the learning? And it's just challenging that idea. It's sometimes still true, but it doesn't always have to be true. There's this quotation here that's been attributed to a number of people, most commonly Mark Twain, but when I did my research, it was more likely to be Josh Billings. And he says, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And that's always been the case, that we've always had misconceptions, but it's more true now than ever before because the world is changing around us so fast. So as he says, the stuff that we know for sure may have been true at some time, but it may not be true anymore. In my conference, in my keynote presentations, I often show this slide and I ask people, what is this? And some people quite quickly recognize this as Pong. So this is what computer games looked like when I was growing up. Now this picture here is of my partner Nikki's teenage son Josh. He's the one on the left, and he loves computer games. And this is what computer games look like now. So he's really big into FIFA and Xbox, and he's just switching over to get the PS4 PlayStation. So this is what computer games look like now. And the point is this, that there are a lot of leaders, business owners, trainers, facilitators who are still Pong thinkers in an Xbox world. And the good news is that you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know everything about the latest technology, about the latest trends, because you've already got those Xbox thinkers in your organization and in your teams if you're taking advantage of them. And a big trend in learning and development is this idea of mentoring, and specifically reverse mentoring. So mentoring is a skill that has been around literally for centuries, but reverse mentoring is a more modern trend. And the idea of reverse mentoring is, well, if you think about traditional mentoring as being the senior, more experienced person mentors the junior person to help them on their career path, reverse mentoring says you go the other way around. So the senior people, the more experienced people, they get some other mentors, and they're the less experienced people, maybe less experienced in their career, maybe younger, but they're the people who have skills, their technology skills, they know latest trends, they're maybe more in touch with consumer behavior at the moment, and so the mentor is actually the more junior person. The Hartford is a company that does this in the USA, and they do it really effectively. And in fact, the reason I've got this slide here is if you want to Google later, if you want to search Hartford, the Hartford reverse mentoring, they've even written a white paper about reverse mentoring because they find it works so well in their organization. And in fact, what they found was that in a year, the first year that they ran it, 11 out of the 12 mentors got a promotion. Remember, the mentors are the more junior people, the less experienced people, but it was valuable for them as well because it was back and forth sounding board. But it just means that you have the attitude of saying that I don't know everything, and there are other people who are smart, talented, savvy in my organization who do know stuff, and why don't I take advantage of that? Closer to home, a couple of examples, and one of the pieces of advice I recommend for you is to get yourself a reverse mentor. And I presented a webinar a couple of years ago, and one of the webinar attendees was Janet Wilson, who's the CEO of Cooper Grace Ward in Brisbane, and she wrote back enthusiastically, and she says that she does exactly this, and she has a reverse mentor, one of her younger graduates, and they meet regularly, and Janet's there to absorb what she can from this younger but really smart, talented, savvy person in her team. And I asked her, what did she get out of it? And she just said, that she has inspirational conversations. They're always refreshing. Sometimes they're quite challenging as well, but it turns out to be very effective. And it's a great way for Janet to keep in touch with what's happening in the outside world. I mean, obviously she's got her experience that she can call on, but she gets a different perspective as well. Okay, I'm getting a couple of comments coming through. Yeah, Yvonne says, I've been doing that with my children for 20 years, and that's right. I think many people here have futurists already in their family, and they're just not taking advantage of them. A couple of questions about references earlier. Yeah, okay, so David's saying, my new question I'm asking my young adult sons, how can what I do be done better or differently if we use technology that you know and enjoy? In fact, yeah, great. That's a really great question to ask, Dave. And in fact, my next slide leads on to that as well. Yvonne says, great to know it's now mainstream. Wrote about an intentional parenting book published 5 years ago. Yeah, great. Fantastic. Okay, so some people are doing this already. So for me, I want to embrace this idea as well. So this is I've just this week engaged a practice manager or PA, Emma. So I think Emma's on the line, so we might bring Emma in later. So I had a bit of a chat. I had to chat with her 10 minutes before this webinar started and said, Em, do you want to speak on the webinar? And she goes, yeah, fine. So Em, so her job is to be my practice manager and help me with my business, but also, like, this is day 4, we've only just started this week. A lot of the work we'll be doing at the moment, we're doing a lot of work together, actually in person in the same room, but a lot of the work that she'll be doing will be doing remotely. So we both live in Perth, but she's quite happy to work from home, and so am I, and travel a bit. So we're trying to figure out how to make things work. And I'm pretty good with virtual collaboration with things like Dropbox and Evernote and Process Street, and making sure that Gmail works really well and we've got a calendar that's coordinated. But I said to him, like, what do we do? What do you recommend? And so she said, oh, we should be using Slack for instant messaging, and we should be using Trello for keeping track of tasks and projects. And look, both of these tools are tools that I was aware of, I'd signed up for, but not really used very well. And Emma has used them a lot. She's an entrepreneur herself. She's an owner in a startup company, so she's using these sort of tools daily. So I said, okay, Em, you're in charge of this. Tell me how to use this and tell me how to make it work. So it's not only about the technology, but it's also about using the technology well and using good judgment in that technology. So I'm a really big fan of reverse mentoring. It's such an easy thing to do if you've got the right mindset, if you've got the mindset that says, I don't know everything and I really want to learn from somebody else who can help me learn, but also I can help them learn as well. So it sounds like some people here are already doing reverse mentoring, which is really good. I'm going to bring you in. So on the call, if you want to talk about, let me just turn your microphone on.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so great to have you, Em. So the thing I want to do is, like, we just talked about this whole idea of flip the teacher. Is there anything that you want to share, Em, just in terms of, like, I don't know, anything you want in terms of your perspective on anything we've covered so far?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for inviting me on firstly, and good morning, everyone. I think my experience being that younger generation, like I'm 25, so I'm classed as a Gen Y, but I think the biggest thing is, working with younger people in your organisations, and I guess I'm coming from that standpoint, but from that different view as well, and just collaborating with that is really important to meet them where they're at as well. And like different technologies like Slack and Trello, we're coming from a generation that are so online and instant messenger, and it's way easier just to message than to call all the time. And I think from a productivity point of view, it can actually increase it hugely because we are in that we are in that generation of being just very instant. And with a lot of my generation coming into the workforce now, and I guess a lot of my generation are in, coming into established careers, we're not so new anymore. We are having to adapt these ways, and it's like you just get better productivity, and it's just easier to manage things. And I think, if you're open to bringing on these technologies, it can work a lot better. And yeah, I guess I'm not sure if that's what you're after, Gihan, but I guess that's my opinion on it, is that, we've got to look at alternative ways of how we used to do things. And yes, things have been done a certain way for 20, 30, 40 years, but we are in a generation now where we want something, it's been there instantly, and that's not a great thing either. However, it is a big part of who we are in our generation, and it's not because we've chosen it that way. It's just we've always had the technology, and whether we agree with that or not, and there's people, it's created a lot around, there's a lot of people that are quite entitled now, but it is purely because when we've needed an answer, that answer's always been there because we've had the internet and we've been able to access it. And, whether we agree with that or not, I think you've got to look at the facts, and that is kind of who we are as a generation, and implementing that in and starting to work with that. Yeah, it'll just increase that productivity, and you kind of feel a bit more free in your work to be able to work independently and be able to communicate without having, I guess, especially for Slack and Trello, they're definitely platforms where you're not overwhelmed with phone calls or emails. You can just instant message back and forth. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my opinion, that we do need to look at different ways, because we do have a generation that is that way inclined now, and they are in the, a lot of them are mature people now in the workforce, and we've got to cater to those ways. And it's forever changing, but I think we've seen a time in generation where things have been very, very similar for quite a long time. And now they've shifted very fast, and you're kind of seeing that in the world. We're having to adapt very quickly and learn new strategies. So yeah, I think it's important to look at that.
Great. While you hear him, because I've seen lots of comments coming in at the moment, I'm seeing lots of comments coming in, and I reckon there's some that I'm going to handball to you. So Yvonne says, I'm currently using a lot of freelancers to learn from them via Upwork, running email campaigns, webinars, and so on. And I know you've got experience as well outsourcing to freelancers. What's your perspective on that?
So definitely, I think I actually, in my company that I have, we use Slack, and we have it as, so you can set up Slack as a company, and in there you can actually invite different freelancers in there. And I've found it really great because you can have certain channels. So let's say you're working on a campaign for a flyer, you've got a webinar campaign happening, you've got, they're working on like your website. You can set up different channels for all of those things. And what you can do is you can add them to Slack. So those people have access to that certain channel. And I mean, it's a little bit hard to explain without the graphics of it, but in Slack, like, you can associate those people to certain channels, and then in that channel is all the information that they have, and the feed never gets lost. So it's not like there's 100 emails there back and forth, and now I'm trying to search back to the email that had the attachment. In Slack, so to speak, a technology like Slack, you can just have that channel, everything's in there, and that person can only access that channel. You may have a different channel for you and your executive team that they don't have access to, where you talk profits and numbers, but you can to have certain access to certain channels. And in that, if you were to post like a attachment or something like that, you can easily search for that attachment. It's not now where it was in those 100 emails. So it's a really good way to collate information and not lose information. Everything's documented. You can access it anywhere in the world as long as you've got like your login. And it integrates really well with Trello boards, with Gmail, with like all of that type of stuff. So I know for us, I've got a Gmail account linked to Slack, which means all the emails come through on Slack, so you know when people have seen them and actioned them. As well. So I hope that helps with your question.
Yeah, great.
But, yeah, it's probably something further there. Like, yeah, if you're wanting more, then obviously, yeah, it's a little bit more than a 5-minute explanation. But it does work really well.
Well, it's funny you said that because David has said it'd be a great topic for a webinar for Emma and you, Gihan, to talk about how you use Slack, Trello, etc. as a team of two. And absolutely, I think that's a great topic for a future webinar, and we will do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Em. So I'll turn your mic off now, and I'll turn it back on. maybe when we have questions at the end as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks. So the one other thing that I'd say around this whole idea of reverse mentoring is, so I grew up, like I learned my first management skills in the 1990s, in the early 90s. And there was a time, I'm sure some people remember the TQM, the Total Quality Management kind of movement, where everything was around checklists and templates and making sure that procedures were in place. And I know my friend Matt Church says that now it should be not about quality control, it should be about quality choice. And that's more and more true, that the people in your team, if you choose well, if you choose your talent well, that they have got skills and talents way beyond their job description and their procedures and their roles and their systems. So if you choose quality, then it doesn't really, then you can trust them more. You can lean on them more, you can ask them more, you can use them as real mentors, not just people that you're trying to mentor. And that's what we're looking for. So like on day one, Em and I, we were talking about, what we're going to do, how we're going to do to work together. And I said, look, Em, part of what I'd like is for you to exercise good judgment in my business, as opposed, like Emma's already got good judgment because she's a business owner, she's got a lot of experience in customer service roles and so on. But I want to teach her enough about my business to then go, okay, now you know, I can let you free without having to have checklists and procedures and templates for everything. We have that as much as possible, but only to improve our efficiency. But you have got smart, talented, absolutely very savvy people in your team, and they should be your mentors as much as you should be helping them mentor and fast track their growth. Okay, so that's the second area, which is the whole idea of reversing the flipping the teacher. Let's look at this third area, which is flipping the program. So should we be looking at the traditional way that people learn? And this is a very broad topic, so I'm only going to cover it in a bit of an overview here, and this probably about 3 topics in one, but let me give you an overview of so you get the concept of changing the way that that we think about training programs. George Whitman, who ran the famous Shakespeare and Company bookstore in Paris, basically said this: all the world's my school, all humanity is my teacher. And now we have got access to so many learning resources from elsewhere, and as Em said, we come in with a whole bunch of information and resources and skills far beyond just a bit of paper that you got when you came out of uni. So, and in fact, this has got its own name, a PLN. So your personal learning network. So, like, how well do you learn? Like, and what media do you use to learn? And now it's very much our choice. So I know that I'm very good at reading, so I read quickly, and I like audio. I don't like video because it's too slow for me. There are other people who love video because they may be, they spend a lot of time on planes, or they just like to relax by watching a bit of video, even if it's educational video. There's some other people who like pictures. They like watching slideshows and presentations. They might like the visual side of webinars. So people have got different learning channels and different learning styles in terms of different learning preferences in terms of how they consume information. It's up to us now to figure out what's right for us. And let me run a quick poll here, and we'll make this one quick, about which are your favorite learning channels. So let me go on to poll number 2. Okay, where is poll number 2? Okay, now GoToWebinar has just changed its system, so I've just got to launch the new poll, and you can see there, this poll's slightly different in that you can tick more than one box here. So what do you like? Do you like to read? Do you like to watch pictures, things like slideshows? Do you like listening to things like podcasts, or do you like watching video? And as I said, you can tick more than one. Okay, great. Thank you for voting quickly. Great. Okay, so we're up to 90% of people have voted, so let me close and share the results. And this is not for any particular reason except for just our interest, and really to make the point that you choose the learning styles that work best for you, and it really is up to us to choose. So for example, I really like audio, and two-thirds of the people or 60% of the people are similar. And I like it for two reasons. One is that I can do it when I went for a run this morning. I could still listen to a podcast, and also I can speed up the podcast and still get the value from listening to it at double speed. So that's also the reason I like text, because I can read fast. But it's interesting here. Most people, 78% of the people, really like audio as well, video as well, and that would be my fourth on the list. So that's it is really up to us to decide how we're going to consume material for ourselves. And by the way, if you're delivering material, how are you going to be delivering it for the people in your learning environments? That whole idea of learning styles and learning preferences has been kind of debunked a little bit, but it's still true that people consume material and they learn in different ways. Okay, so the point I want to make, the next point I want to make is about not just individual learning channels, but it's also about people having access to online learning. And I remember many years ago when I was about 8 years old. It's even before we moved to Australia. I remember reading about Australia, and one of the things I was amazed reading about was the Royal Flying Doctor Service in the School of the Air. And at the time, I thought it was amazing. Here are these kids who have an education, even though there's no school around them. And now, of course, we call that online learning. And this is a big area, and big companies are doing it. Accenture is doing this. They have this huge interactive network for their staff to do online learning. Deloitte has a university around the world. Deloitte University has 100,000 plus students, and part of the reason that they've got so much traction is that the senior leaders really pushed it and they backed it. They have simulations that they can do online in their online university, and they have the opportunity for students to act as teachers. So it's again that reverse mentoring idea again. Ticketmaster's doing it. So again, they have simulations for people to learn in a safe environment. They have assessments and reviews that happen online. And in the US, Target's doing it as well. So they have the traditional training course, but they also have one-on-one coaching, they have e-learning, and they have wikis. So if you know about Wikipedia, which is this shared encyclopedia, the general concept of a wiki is that you have this online website that anyone can update. And by doing that, as learners learn new stuff that they want to update the wiki, they then make it available for other people to learn from in the future. Okay, so if you're not a Deloitte or an Accenture or a Target, what do? Well, you can sign up to MOOCs, or massive open online courses, and you can make them available to your people as well. And you can have MOOCs with 100,000 people in them, but you still get individual attention, because you get attention from the other students and from not just the tutor, not just the lecturers, but there are tutors as well. There's self-appointed tutors, so it's a really social learning environment. And the big criticism of MOOCs is one that you should be aware of. You should be aware of, and you should beware of, because it's actually not a valid criticism. And the biggest criticism of MOOCs is that there's a 95% failure or dropout rate. And they say, well, how good can a training environment be if 90% of the students fail? The reason this is not valid is because it doesn't cost anything to join a MOOC. Many of the MOOCs are free, completely free, and all you've got to do is sign up, username and password, and you've signed up. So people could even sign up just to try it out and then decide it's not for them, and they get counted among that 95%. And the other reason why that 95% number doesn't matter is because the M in MOOC stands for massive. So for example, my friend Chris Pudney, who told you will send you his program about online courses, a couple of years ago he did a MOOC. He tried one of the MOOCs with one of the largest MOOC providers called Coursera, and they had a 95% dropout rate, exactly as the stats predicted. However, there were literally 100,000 students doing that MOOC with Chris. So the 5% who succeeded, who passed that course, we're talking about 5,000 students actually did that course and passed from all around the world. And just to put that in context, that at the time that Chris did the course, 5,000 students was pretty much the same as the number of people who completed an IT course at university that year. So the percentage doesn't matter, because the absolute numbers are compelling. So, and especially if you as an organization sponsor the MOOCs for your people and you provide the pre-work and the post-work, MOOCs are very, very successful. So don't be swayed by the common criticism that is 95% dropout. If you want to do MOOCs yourself, and I really recommend that you do if you haven't done it, so I always ask my audiences how many people have done a MOOC, and I'm surprised at how few have actually done it. It's less than 5% of the audience who put up their hands to say they've done it. If you want to do some yourself, then I recommend you sign up to opentostudy.com, which is backed by a number of Australian and New Zealand universities, and Open to Study is they're smaller MOOCs, so you don't get 100,000 people, but you might get a couple of thousand people on a MOOC. They're shorter courses and they're probably more practical for workplace education. So not many workplaces would do data visualization like Chris did, but you might do innovation, you might do financial planning, you might do things around marketing. So those are 3 courses that I've done through opentostudy.com for my own education as well as to figure out how MOOCs work. So I recommend that you do that. Okay, so those are the 3 things that we covered. So we covered flip the classroom, flip the teacher, flip the program. Just before we finish up, I'm going to just check if there's any last questions, comments, anything else that you want to ask me or you want to ask Emma as well. Yeah, so David asked questions like, what about other learning, like discussion, questions, practicing, etc. Yeah, and David, you're exactly right. So those, it's just the only reason I didn't talk about that today was just because of time constraints, but absolutely, and those are the things that I've covered in that, like in my book, and I'm not trying to sell the book, but in the book, The Future of Leadership, the whole chapter about accelerating the experience curve talks about 6 things, and we've covered a couple of them here. Mentoring is one, the online learning is another one, but there are the other things like shadowing and case studies and a couple of other things that you've talked about, David, absolutely there. And maybe we'll do a future webinar about those things, but they're absolutely all part of it. And it's very much about that combines all those 3, flipping the classroom concept, flipping the teacher, and flipping the idea that you're doing continuous learning rather than doing simple learning programs. David says, great book. Thank you, David. Thank you for that endorsement. Any other questions or comments? Yvonne says, love Slack. Felicity says, yeah, my children and their grandparents. Interesting. So my children and their grandparents now say, just ask Google if we don't have an instant answer. Really nice to see that, Felicity, that not only your children, but also that your parents are doing that. Just ask Google. Fantastic. Fantastic, because the mentoring works across multiple generations in both directions. Okay, so just to finish up, to find out what you're going to do and take away, let me do a couple of other quick polls, and this is just a poll. These polls are just about what you're going to do afterwards. So which of these 3 things, flip the classroom, flip the teacher, and flip the program, are you already doing well? And if you're an educator, which of those are you implementing? And if you're a business leader or you've got this in your organization, which of these are you actually embracing and doing? So we've got 2 questions here. The first one is, which of these are you doing well? And then the next one is going to be, which of these will you do better? So let's do the first one. So which of these are you doing well at the moment? Great, we've got to, yep, almost a 70% threshold. Good, let me share the results. Okay, so really great to see that lots of people are doing flip the classroom, which is fantastic. And there are a lot of tools now that make it easier to flip the classroom, but there's some resistance to it, and some of it's just natural resistance that you may not be doing it already. So because you're not doing it already, it's easier to just keep doing the things that you've always done. And it's nice to see that people are doing flip the program as well, so making learning not just in a class or in a scheduled training environment, but part of continuous learning. Okay, and the last of the polls is which of these will you do better? So let me launch that for you, exactly the same options. So as a result of today's webinar, what you're going to do, really what I'm asking is, well, what are you going to do differently, or what are you going to take on board and have a go at? It doesn't mean that you're going to immediately embrace it. And as I said at the start, this is not about throwing out what you're already doing. It's about enhancing it and adding to it. Okay, most people have responded, so let me close the poll. Okay, so really pleasing to see lots of people want to do flip the teacher, which is the idea that I mentioned about reverse mentoring. I think it's going to be so valuable if you're not already doing it. If you really what it is taking advantage of the talent and skills in your organization, your team already. You've already got them there. You've already got the talents and skills there. Maybe you're not taking full advantage of them. So really great to see that lots of people are planning to do that, as well as quite a few people are planning to do flip the program. Fewer for flip the classroom, but I assume that's because you're already doing that, so you don't need to necessarily say we're going to do more of that. My last message for you from today's topic is don't wait for everything to line up and that you're going to be perfectly ready for it. Just start before you're ready, because things will never be perfect. You always start off with an imperfect situation, and if you don't do something, then your competition certainly will. And as I said, if you've got quality choice rather than going for quality control, then you can start before you're 100% ready for it. And the other thing about quality choice is that maybe you can just give up some of that control, and you may realize that you actually didn't need to hold on so tightly anyway, that you've got the talent there, you're just not letting them blossom and you're not giving them the opportunities. So thank you for taking part in today's webinar. The next one in this series, coming up on the 2nd of August, is all about disruption. So it's looking at why businesses are being disrupted and what you can do to avoid being disrupted. If you're watching this live, then you don't need to do anything. You'll get the reminders automatically, and so just stick the date in your calendar and just turn up to the webinar. If you're watching the recording of this and you're not subscribed to the webinar series, you're not registered, then just go to seeingintothefuture.com and you can register there, and you get all the webinars then from then on. And it's also useful because then you can pick and choose which ones you choose to attend. If you'd like to talk to me about what I can do to help you out, I'm a conference keynote speaker, so you can find these all out at gihanperera.com. So conference keynote speaker, and I do some training within organizations following on from the conferences. Also facilitate strategic planning for your teams. And I've got a new program called Futurists in Residence, where I come in as I come in and consult to your senior leaders or to your board every quarter about what's happening with trends and potential disruptors to your industry. So if you'd like to find out more about any of those, please let me know. Get in touch with me through the website gihanperera.com or email me. There's my email address there. As I said at the start, if you'd like to get a copy of the audio program that Chris and I did all about online learning, then complete the exit survey, and Em and I will send that to you after the webinar. So thanks everyone for being here today. Thank you so much for participating. I hope you got some value, and I hope you got some immediately actionable value that you can put into your business and your workplace now. And over there, I reckon you should do it in the next week or so. Thanks everyone, and bye for now.